Cloud Foundry After Dark. These are the droids you're looking for. Way to go. What's up, James Waters?
Always to me. I was gonna say, is he gonna start with me? Always pressure me. We got Steven, we got Mark, we got James Bear. It's a fantastic Sunday night.
Imbriaco came back to visit.
Yeah, man, I had to come talk shit about Lattice.
We're trying. We're trying over here. We do what we can.
You were in danger, Mark, because as soon as you said anything positive about it, the container land is so political these days that like 8 different vendors gang tackled you on Twitter. They're like,
I got hammered by the Kubernetes guy.
yeah,
I actually like Kubernetes.
it's like no one containers in this town unless it has, the right brand on it.
Yeah, I mean, containers are kind of boring. I've been doing them since like 2010. Come on, guys.
I know.
We called it LXC back then.
Yeah.
Everyone called it LXC, and then we got hip, and we went hipster, and we made our own. Artisanal.
Yeah, I mean, back at Heroku in 2010, we were doing this whole container
You got to get up higher on the camera.
It's old school Heroku staff shirt. I thought it would be appropriate for today.
I'm wearing configuration management camp.
Very nice.
Yeah, so that's what I noticed is that like immediately any vendor in our space, any positive tweet about this, they were just gang tackling people and trying to convince them that that was a bad idea to even play with that. I was like, guys, let's... What happened to the spirit of open source and experimentation here, guys? This seems a little bit vendory and negative.
It's about ethics and container journalism.
It's actually...
Where's GigaOM when we need him?
Yeah.
Pour one out.
Seriously.
There's no such thing as bad publicity, right?
There's no such thing as bad publicity. So Steven here, actually, he probably put in the longest day battling through the Vagrant file to make it work.
Well, if you're talking about Lattice, someone had mentioned they might come and actually talk about Lattice.
That's you. Don't you know how this works?
I have a general overview that I'm noticing. I don't know if you saw my tweet earlier, but it seems that people tend to focus on working on OS X or on whatever, and then they hard code that into their Vagrant files or they hard code that into their configurations. And so a lot of the times I grab things, I have to actually go in and like modify and take out /applications or move things around, and it's kind of annoying, and it tends to be everybody, not any one specific thing. And with this one, it was just I was trying to run it on Ubuntu with with the Vagrant and VirtualBox. And of course, it just didn't work out of the box. But I was able to build it and bring it up. Now I'm having some trouble with routing, but I haven't spent the time to really debug that yet.
Yeah, I think one of the things there is that they originally got excited about the Vagrant stuff, but then it got more love on Terraform, it seems like. So that, at least from what I've seen, people are having easier time getting little clusters up on those clouds.
That's a good debate. I mean, there's a whole. I mean, I think we ought to start with like, what in the heck is this thing that we've been tweeting about, kind of with like an insider's.
That we sort of put on a website just like a week ago, and we're like, hey, just there you go.
Yeah. So James Baird, do you want to give your perspective on it?
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, it's Cloud Foundry by subtraction, because we basically had all this feedback that it was really hard on a local developer desktop to get started with Cloud Foundry. You had to learn Bosch to get the full Cloud Foundry experience going. So we basically took away the cloud controller, which is like the multi-tenant part of Cloud Foundry that separates things out. We took away the UAA, which handles the security, and we took away the requirement that you had to use Bosch. And what's left is a bunch of our next generation runtime code called Diego, the dynamic router, and the logging service. So it's just like really those three components of all written in Go, really lightweight, and you can get started with a Vagrant image, or you can put it on a cloud like DigitalOcean or AWS or Google, and that's really what it is. It lets you run Docker images and route to them dynamically and get the logs from them dynamically. That's Lattice in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think ideally it's not quite there perfectly today because Diego hasn't changed everything yet, but it becomes the single user mode of Elastic Runtime. So if you just want to use Elastic Runtime as a single user without the overhead of teams, org, spaces, identity, policies, etc., it kind of becomes a very basic single user mode of that, which I think is important actually.
Well, you also don't have the build packs, which I kind of want to give people a nice tool chain to break that into a separate service so you can still see that running in Lattice as well.
Well, that's what I'm saying, Schaefer. It's not that today. So it takes longer explanation today, but once we add that, then I think it becomes the single.
Well, I don't think that should be added to Lattice. That should be a separate service that has its own.
Should just be an app you deploy in Lattice.
Life. Everything should be like recursively deployed onto something else.
I mean, that's how build packs at Heroku actually work. They're an app that's deployed in Heroku. So the build process to build dynos actually happens on Heroku.
Yeah, that's actually when you deploy Diego with Cloud Foundry together, and when we process the build packs, there's a Diego primitive called a task, which is I think it's very similar to the worker dyno in Heroku that just runs an asynchronous process and it finishes it, and in this case it happens to be processing the build pack and creating the, in Heroku terms that would be a slug, and in Cloud Foundry it would be a droplet.
I like to call those root file systems.
You don't say droplet, that's going to confuse the shit out of me.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that one's unfortunate. From the Cloud Foundry uses droplet, and DigitalOcean has droplet all over the place.
Yep.
Hey, so Craig Tracy came on, and Andrew, you see his subtitle tonight? This is a good one. Aspiring Latticetician.
Okay, nice. He's over there with mud and blood on his hands, I think, doing the OpenStack stuff, though.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, like 3+ years now, and I think I'm probably showing the scars at some point.
I have the scars. I'll show you on my leg where OpenStack got me in 2010.
And Tushar, where are you coming in from? What's your story? Can you hear us?
Or you can lurk. I don't think his mic's working.
Yeah, sorry, Tushar.
He's on the Cloud Ops team, I believe. Do a thumbs up or something if you are on Cloud Ops, Tushar. Hey, I got it right. So he works on the cloud operations team running the production Cloud Foundry on AWS for Pivotal.
Nice.
So I think the main thing is just to get that work we're doing so that people can see it and use it. And I think it's a useful piece of infrastructure that hopefully people will do creative things with. And I think it also allows us, because of the way that we work with Cloud Foundry and the release cycle we have for our own product, I think we can do experiments around scheduling, service discovery, the rest of these things. We can iterate much faster and make progress and bring that back into the product where you don't have to be so committed and say, okay, like this is the way we're going to do it.
Absolutely.
So with Lattice, the kind of burning question that I've had, and I haven't had a chance to dig deep enough, is it possible to make sort of the core components in Lattice HA? Is there anything that's stopping you from making kind of what's there highly available?
Right now, the way that we separated two roles, what we call the coordinator, and I think the other one is a little bit like just like a cell. So the coordinator is a single thing right now, but there's no reason it couldn't be assembled into a highly available thing because it's using etcd and console, and they do some kind of a leader election, essentially using those distributed config state management things. And when I say using that, because we're kind of in this middle ground where we're using a little bit of etcd and a little bit of console at the same time. But the design goal is to be completely highly available, and if you want to run it in that way. We don't start it that way out of the box because we want to keep the resource consumption really low.
Sure.
Yeah, and Mark, a lot of people, don't remember. You visited the Cloud Foundry engineering team. It had to be back in 2011. I remember taking you to Caltrain, right?
It was 2011, right after I had left Heroku and joined Living Social.
Yeah, and you said, hey, I need a PaaS, and I don't want to build it myself, but what's the smallest unit of platform currency you guys could give me? And I remember in that whiteboard the way that the cloud controller was entangled into everything and everything. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't a small unit we could give you. And
it's all or nothing. That's the old story, right?
Yeah, and I at the time, the way that we've done the architecture, I couldn't give you a smaller slice. So it was part of the reason I was pretty passionate when we did Diego, that we need smaller slices for units of currency that are useful if people want to build their own, that don't need multi-tenant cloud services. So
it's kind of that way with everybody still, right? The vast majority of these sort of platform-shaped things do way more than I want them to do. What I really want is effectively what Lattice does, but HA. I want something that's very simple, that does sort of runtime management, that lets me deploy my artifacts, and it manages keeping them running for me, and gives me some very simple routing on top of it, and then gets the hell out of the way.
So if we give you HA Lattice, we will have fulfilled the ask from 2011.
Exactly. We're there.
I mean, software takes time, I guess, but I just don't forget that you played a part in this, I guess is what I'm saying. Like, you planted that unmet need in my mind. I remember driving you to Caltrain and being disappointed that we couldn't do that for you. So.
Well, I've got some 4-year-old tweets of my kids wearing Cloud Foundry T-shirts. So.
Hey, Mark, I got a question for you about that. In that scenario, are you imagining that you're gonna? What other components would you use in your dev tool chain? Presumably, like GitHub. Would you have your own blob store? Would you expect that to be provided by the platform, or would you expect to be like, hey, I got my own blob store. I don't need that.
I'm totally fine using my own, like bring my own Docker registry is not problematic for me.
Okay.
Or hell, even point at S3 URLs, right?
Yeah. That's basically kind of like what we've been debating a little bit is how far to go on that front, and right now we haven't put a blob store inside, even a super simple one. Yeah, I'm just curious what else would you have besides an SCM system and a blob store in your tool chain? Would you need anything else, or do you have like what else would you grab?
I think you guys give me the things that I really want, which is routing, which is log aggregation, which is running processes. I don't think there's a whole lot more that I need. I've got the build side handled. We've already got our own build pipeline. We can generate Docker images. That's not a problem. We can shove them in S3. That's not a problem. I don't know what else I need. It's probably operational things around it, honestly, and I haven't run it enough to know what sort of operational questions I need to answer there yet.
Cool.
I got a question for James. Hi, it's Carlos here. How you see the HA for the brain in Diego?
So yeah, the brain in Diego, for the most part, relies on right today it's etcd for most functions, and there's a little bit of service discovery provided through console, and then the other components should be able to be run horizontally scalable. So there's some things in Diego that do things like I think it's called the converger, that takes the expected state that you say and the desired or the expected or desired state, whatever you want to call it, and then the actual state, and it constantly tries to make them one thing. So that's what I mentioned earlier. There's only one of those running, actually running at a time, but you can have n of those running, and there'll be a leader election with the lock. So it shouldn't be a problem to make the brain, have multiple copies of it, because the components should do the right thing.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, but James, you talk a little bit about if you lose the configuration of etcd when you're running full Cloud Foundry, the Cloud Controller database is a more recoverable place to. You want to talk a little bit about that trade-off that we have a failover in Cloud Foundry to the CCDB?
Yeah, so Cloud Foundry behind the Cloud Controller, which is the stores the basically desired state in the full Cloud Foundry. That stores things in a relational database, MySQL or Postgres, and in Lattice we're relying on Diego, which is in turn relying on etcd to do that same thing today. Now you can power down your, I've done it myself plenty of times, power down your Lattice virtual machine, power it up again, and etcd does keep those things on disk. It's just, the operational characteristics around etcd are nowhere near as proven as a relational database. And it's actually one of the things Ansi and the Diego team are looking at is should we consider a relational database component instead for some of those things that we're probably abusing the shared consistent state tools for, like etcd and console. So that might be coming in the future, a relational database backend for the kind of the intended state or desired state store.
Would that get too chunky for you, Mark, or is that still in play?
No, I think that's a reasonable. It's not a huge amount of additional complexity, right? It's just another.
I think
storage backend.
Mark ran some Postgres before.
Yeah, just a little bit. Well, and the beauty of that, right, is I don't even have to run it. I can let Amazon run it for me now, and I'm perfectly happy to do that. Except you have to wait forever for RDS to spin up. It literally took longer for RDS to give me a new database
How long did it
for the entire Lattice cluster to start.
Did it take 15 minutes?
It took between 10 and 15. Actually, it took about 15 minutes to get a new MySQL instance, just so I could run a WordPress site in Lattice as my test.
Yeah, 15 minutes of my experience lately with RDS MySQL.
Completely crazy. Made no sense. Literally, the Lattice cluster came up faster.
I mean, to me, that's just a sign that no one's pressing them on that, right? Like that's a solvable problem. They just haven't, had the need to optimize.
Absolutely, it shouldn't take that long.
I don't know, man. Distributed state's hard. Storing state is hard.
Turns out I got some experience provisioning new relational databases on the fly too.
It's true.
How long does Heroku Postgres take to get a new one?
It sort of depends on what size. They're mostly bound by how long it takes to bring up the AWS instance that runs under it.
Okay, so that it's not like a standby thing. Like you're doing it like you ask Amazon, give me a VM.
So I haven't been there in 4 years. We talked about having a Slack pool of VMs available so they could provision quickly, but I don't know if they have. I don't know what the rate of provisioning is and whether it's justifiable right now.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here this dovetails into some interesting stuff that's been on my head. And one of them is a video that got posted on Cloud Foundry as well, which is managing state with the containers in Diego, and then also thinking about the full lifecycle of a data service from a platform perspective. It's one thing to schedule something stateless. Okay, now we have to manage disk. Now we have to manage restarts. Now we have to manage backups. And I was just curious, as much as you can talk about this kind of stuff, Mark, how you think about that, how you'd set that up to do things yourself, and then what you would expect a platform like we're trying to build with Cloud Foundry to be able to do for you.
Yeah, from my point of view, I don't want the platform today to do any of that shit. All I want out of my platform, and I'm a very probably unique use case, but all I want is stateless processes. All I want is sort of the immutable infrastructure bits to be scheduled by the platform. I'm the sort of the ecosystem around the platform, since these days I live in AWS or Google Compute or whatever. They can provide me the data services and the other ancillary services around my platform. And if I need something that the platform doesn't provide, I'm happy to stand it up outside of the platform instead of bringing the extra complexity that managing network and ACLs and storage and all the other HA components and discovery and everything else that you have to do as soon as you start building a stateless service. Like, as soon as you add that into the platform, it starts getting so complicated that I don't want to run it myself anymore.
So let's just say you worked at like a big financial services company and you really wanted to be able to provision these databases. What would you want? How would you think about it?
I'm not convinced that
because you're not quite ready to go full Amazon. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm not convinced that you deploy those kinds of things in the same platform that you deploy your stateless applications into. I could be wrong, but I worry that when you add that all the state management stuff into the same platform that manages the stateless stuff, you're complicating what is the 99% use case, which is stateless containers, for the sake of for these stateful things. It almost feels to me like managing those things in a different way, kind of separately from the core stateless management bits, makes a lot of sense. I don't know.
That's what we did.
Incidentally, that's what we do right now.
We did. I mean, we have a much harder to learn, much more complicated, system that speaks about stateful disks and life cycle of them, called Bosch. That is notoriously not 5-minute getting started, WordPress friendly. So it's kind of,
as one field engineer put it, it's a bag of knives.
That's the whole way to negative. I prefer to say it as a steep learning curve, because there's also people who learn it and love it, like Tony Hansman, who we've had on, and once you're fully equipped with how to throw those knives, people swear by that as a survival technique.
Who wouldn't want a bag of knives?
Right.
And where's Dr. Nick when we need him?
Yeah, Nick loves it.
No one who's really learned it doesn't love it. That's the other thing.
Yeah. But that's the separation we have. But James, Ted from the Diego team, he gave a presentation on how to bring stateful things to Diego, and that would be Lattice. But I think it's interesting because Mark's comment to the Google Kate's team was you impose a lot of complexity with all the networking that you do. And they do some of that networking in order to enable heterogeneous nodes, right? Not just 12-factor nodes. So I think that is a very real trade-off in the market, and I'm really curious if a purely stateless, app manufacturing cluster kind of comes to be as an independent entity, or if there's heterogeneous clusters end up winning.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly a lot of people trying to do it, right? Like you look at, whether it's Kubernetes or Mesos, they both have design documents out there for adding persistent state to their systems. This presentation you're mentioning from Ted was like a 2-week spike effort just to say, like, hey, look, what if we imagined adding a volume set and volume management to Diego? What would that look like? And just playing with things for 2 weeks, and then he presented that, and he made it work. Basically the idea of provisioning a fixed size EBS volume inside of the Diego cell, and then when your container asks for, you would actually manage it ahead of time. So it's a little bit more like an EBS volume, where you say, like, okay, give me one of those things, and then now you have it, and then you would say, schedule this container where that volume lives. That's kind of how they modeled it, but it's like a 2-week spike, and gave us an idea about what one possible way to imagine the world in Diego with persistent disk is. But it certainly does make it more complicated, right? Like those APIs start bleeding throughout, and the scheduler has to be aware of things, and you have questions about, like, well, if I'm pre-provisioning this disk, but then the amount of disk I need and the type of disk I need for maybe persisting Redis is certainly a lot different from the type of disk I might need to do some kind of other big data, Hadoop or something like that, right? So it's going to be. I definitely see, like, having a dedicated, special, fit for purpose type of system manage the persistent disk is. I can see how that's attractive, but there's certainly people trying to do it like an all-in-one platform too. So I don't know what's going to win out.
It's almost like, back to Craig, are those people trying to invent? And I ask these questions because I genuinely don't know. Is it wise to reinvent poor man's OpenStack with containers all over again? That was, as I, about a year ago, watched Docker trying to become an full-fledged infrastructure service. I was like, hey, we've done this with OpenStack before, and these networking and storage issues are very difficult.
So for the people watching or anyone here, that's actually in the same channel, the YouTube channel. You could watch that talk Ted gave about the experiment he did with Stateful Diego.
I'm just not in a huge hurry with Diego to compete with OpenStack, right? Like, I think if there are things that schedule virtual machines and disks, and we ought to take advantage of that. But at the same time, I think the counter argument I know from at least one place on Wall Street was, and we're feeling this, that their OpenStack deployment wasn't stable enough. And so then the business teams are pushing them to go bare metal and whatever they could put on top of that, quote unquote, bare metal. I don't know, Craig, how do you look at this in terms of the Docker millennial zeal saying, oh, we can do it better this time, and how that's going to end?
That's a good question. I don't really know how it's going to end. If I knew, I probably wouldn't be doing OpenStack anymore. I think what Mark touched on is, and what everyone else has touched on is absolutely true. Is the difficult parts of OpenStack are the neutrons, and not so much Cinder, because Cinder is kind of stupid. Like it's just carving up volumes and presenting it to the guest. But certainly in terms of networking and complexity, or networking is where you get a lot of the complexity. Like if I think about the problems that we encounter with OpenStack, it's almost probably 85+% of the time it's neutron that we're dealing with. So I think from this perspective, like when we're talking about Lattice or any of these type of orchestration tools or platform tools, that I think it's certainly better. I think you should rely on the underlying infrastructure to manage that sort of stuff out the gate, certainly.
What plugin are you guys using with Cinder?
We don't. I mean, Cinder is
actually
pretty stable.
What about Neutron? Like you guys, are you running Neutron with which backend?
We are ML2 with Linux Bridge. We were OVS for a while, and we kind of ripped it out and said, and that's actually a great example. So OVS, right? I have a background in networking. I have a background in kernel development, but doing OpenStack, I don't want to worry about those bits. And what we were encountering with OVS, and I think this is pretty common across all of the OpenStack, and people who are doing OpenStack that I know, is that OVS is a black box. If it's not working, it's not working, and you have really no recourse into making it work better, other than praying that someone upstream has seen the same problem or has already fixed it in some future release. And by the way, replacing OVS, in a running production cloud is not a trivial task. So that's I think we moved to Linux Bridge because it's something that it's well understood. It's been baking in the kernel for a very long time. We have people who know Linux Bridges inside and out, and it makes our job easier. We don't have to fight through this kind of like black box scenario where we don't know what's going on, and we don't. It's not that we couldn't figure out what's going on. We really don't have the time to figure out what's going on. We just want to move forward. So I would argue, for things like, at the platform layer, that you should rely on the underlying infrastructure to manage that stuff for you, at least out the gate.
I mean, this is something we're seriously talking about, like OVS. I mean, that's how Socket Plane, I believe, implemented stuff, and Docker acquired them. You're saying tread carefully jamming that into your container cluster manager, because now you've inherited something that's relatively new, and the average developer does not want to learn how to Stack Overflow debugging that.
Yeah, absolutely. And OVS has been around quite a while now, and arguably, like, we were on an older release of OVS, so we were on late ones here, like 1.11, I think, or something like that. And when we made the decision to switch out, so things may certainly be different now, but I think in many respects, like Neutron for OpenStack gets a bad name. For many, I mean, they have their own faults for sure. There's no question about that. But I think at the same time, it's a very complex issue. It's certainly the most complex part of the stack, by far and away.
Now you have n plus the number of nodes in your system problems.
Do you guys know that VMware has 6,000 engineers? I was drinking with one of their CTOs last weekend.
It's a $40 billion company.
No, I'm just saying, like, when I watch people say, "Oh, we're just gonna go figure out how networking and storage between all of these nodes across virtualized areas work," I'm just sort of like,
Well, how big was Nicira when they bought them, right? Because those guys were doing it better than those 6,000 engineers were.
Well, that's the counter argument, and I'm totally open to that, which is like bloated enterprise company is bloated. Like, I'm just, it's always like hard to know which hard problems to respect and which hard problems to think are invented. That's a tough question. And I'm sure that half of them are unnecessary, but I bet about 1,000 of them are really required for some of the complexity that they deal with. And
frankly, when you look at a lot of those startups, they kind of got spawned out of those big companies and then brought back into them, right? Like when you see hard infrastructure startups, especially in the networking space, they're often people that were at Cisco or whatever.
They're pretty much always people that were at the big guys, yeah.
Yeah, there's not a lot of Y Combinator SDN startups, with 19.
Thank God.
I should challenge the guy from Y Combinator. Like, why haven't you disrupted infrastructure yet?
Well, I don't know if you're doing the math, but it seems like the payouts on building messaging and like picture application seems better than this infrastructure stuff we keep hurting ourselves with.
I would argue that they would answer you with a single word. Why haven't you disrupted infrastructure? They would respond Heroku.
That's fair. That's fair. I ran into Mark Benioff at a customer meeting, and we had a briefing platform. So that was a little tense.
What was so tense about it?
It was just like, Cloud Foundry thing, how's that going? You know what I mean? Like, and we've obviously had great results, but I tried to act completely disinterested, and he's like, who's your biggest customer? And, but it's all good. I think his heart, he said, look, we're a CRM company. He came out and said that, right? I mean, I think Heroku's really cool. There's some really talented people there, but I think at the end of the day, that's what Mark is about, is he's not trying to become the next VMware. Unlike some other folks that are out there.
Yep, that's definitely not their goal.
Yeah, I think that night he was more concerned with Indiana as well.
Well, that was, not to tell private backstories, but it was pretty fascinating. He had took an awesome stand on the Indiana legislation. And again, it's really his story to tell, but he was watching his Twitter feed blow up while we were chatting, and it was coming in so fast, the mentions, that he couldn't even read them. But he was like, how do you even deal with this? Like, it was like, it was sort of like if you do a search for Netflix or something really popular on Twitter, and it's 3 or 4 a second, you can't read it. So that was cool to see, and it's a side story, but now everyone in the world's lined up behind him, so way to go, Mark.
So go ahead.
Hop in.
Go ahead, please.
No, hop in.
Okay, so I'm here in China, so
Are you the one DDoS from GitHub?
Sorry?
Are you the one DDoSing GitHub from China?
No, it's not me. So I ordered the Cloud Foundry meetup last Saturday, so in Shanghai. So you have some kind of interesting ideas there. So some startups presenting some hacks they did in Cloud Foundry, and 2 things. One startup, small startup, like I think 10 employees, they remove Warden and plug Docker for the containers. And I just want to find out, you guys, you have opinions about this, or what do you think about this idea that they had there? They kind of, and the motivation, what they said was, okay, Warden only runs on Ubuntu, and they don't support other operating systems. Diego is not here yet. It's going to take some time. And for us, if Docker, you don't need build packs and so on. So these are the main motivations that they decide to remove Warden and plug Docker as for the containers.
That's actually a really great topic. So, James Barry, you want to give detail, but we just at a high level, strategically, we've just finished implementing Garden on Ubuntu for Diego to be functional and Lattice to run. We don't have a long-term interest in maintaining our own, container management system like libcontainer, but at the same time, we're responsible for a huge array of enterprise customers in production. So we've continued to maintain that ourselves because the marketing benefits of saying that we use the Docker or libcontainer ones are not bigger than the costs of potential problems with our customers. But we're going to hopefully be publishing some research on the design paper around continuing Garden using Docker or Docker, libcontainer, or both, or even using Rocket from CoreOS and App Container. And I'd love feedback on this, but my guidance to the team was, look, marketing comes and goes. It's not about that. We have plenty of funding to keep going as long as we need to. We have lots of great customers. But could you please go pick the best technology for us to bet on here at the core of our platform? So that's what the guidance was. Now, in some ways, it'd be great if they picked Docker because it was the best tech and the most popular thing. It's easiest to explain. But we're not a tiny startup looking to get attention.
So you guys are moving over to SmartOS?
Now then, you know I'm ex-Solaris, right, Mark?
I couldn't resist. You said best technology, so I couldn't resist.
Oh, I know, and you cannot underestimate ecosystem either. But as you said so smartly last week, Mark, a lot of these companies are just taking credit for Linux kernel features. They're not actually independent things.
So if you look at the difference between what Garden offers versus what Docker offers, I think that the Docker adoption is largely because they spent a lot of time, and rightly so, on the usability from the developer perspective and getting started. But the work on Garden put a lot more thought into the life cycle of the process and really maintaining those processes at scale, and then also a lot of telemetry. And I think that as we're running Docker images under Garden in Lattice right now, and obviously there's some things that are maybe missing or could be improved, but I think that the point that he just made, that these aren't really, containers is not a technology. Container is a feature of the Linux kernel that's been there for the better part of a decade now, and we're all just trying to figure out how to use it, make the best use of it.
Yeah, I mean, just to add a couple other comments there. Andrew's spot on in that for us, the operational features of running this thing at scale with thousands of containers was our number one motivation, as opposed to the user experience for a single developer, like creating a one root file system. One of the things that we did recently is we added user namespaces to Garden, so that's already in there. And I think Docker's going to get there in probably the 1.7 time frame, maybe 1.6, but and there are some other things, like the example that we always give is if you have the Docker daemon crash, all of the containers on that Docker host go away. And with Garden, that's not the case. If we have some kind of issue where we need to, like, let's say, update the Garden with new source code, the containers can continue running, and then we can reconnect to them. If there's a crash, we can restart that process. And so that's definitely desirable, to not evacuate potentially hundreds of containers from a host if you don't need to, because that's a very heavy tax on the system. You start, imagine like when you have hundreds of containers running, and now you've got to like talk to the blob store, potentially pulling down these root file systems from all over the place and rescheduling those all at once. If you can avoid that problem, you really want to, because that puts a whole strain on your system. But I think Docker will eventually get to those kinds of things, and if you want to go look at the Garden backlog, one of the things that we're doing is looking at the other container options out there, like libcontainer, James mentioned, or Docker as a backend, or some of the stuff that the app container image and Rocket. We're going to look at all those things because as these other options all get better, and we want to, as James mentioned, be part of a bigger ecosystem. We'd like to join forces and do that hopefully in a way that's open. Like I really like the app container image stuff.
Yep.
And I think what some of the stuff that the Docker has done recently with publicizing their Docker image format for V2 and the new registry stuff is a lot more well specified than it was before.
The containers are going to be commodity, so it'd be nice to just get to one kind of standard format everyone could use.
Does that make sense to everybody? And our ad hoc advisory board, Craig, Mark, Steven, do you think we go straight marketing Führer and just like whatever's at the top of Hacker News, we just weld that thing in immediately?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What could possibly go wrong?
Hacker News driven development.
I mean, just if you ever want to know how to do everything right, just ask Hacker News.
Can't wait to get their relationship advice. Ask Hacker News.
What could possibly go wrong?
So Carlos, here's a good question though. If they wanted the Docker container support within Cloud Foundry, what were they getting from Cloud Foundry? So what were they excited about on the Cloud Foundry front? What was the vibe there?
Well, I think here in China they have a big community in Cloud Foundry, so there's a lot of people hacking around, doing different experiments, changing lots of things. And I believe all this facility of have Bosch in there to manage the VMs for them, manage the container. I think they like that, so that's why they want to build on top of that. And for me, what I understood from the presentation was in Mandarin, so I could not get much, but I went through the slides, and that's the main point was this ecosystem, the idea of don't have build packs and be something easier to them to plug things. So that's why I understand from the presentation. And that's why intriguing ideas, because it'd be hard for them to keep up with Cloud Foundry, for example, and have new releases. They always have to keep updating what they have to the branch of Cloud Foundry. So might be a challenge for them, but they are small, and I don't know.
So one of the things that's happening at the Cloud Foundry Summit, which is also a topic we could dovetail into at some point, is a panel debating the value of build packs. And I think that you can discard the notion of build packs because you think it's a way to get going faster and easier, but I think from an operational perspective and day two forward that you have a lot of advantages with build packs that you lose, especially as you start to get any drift in the base images and in the workflow. So if you have really strong hygiene, you have a really nice build pipeline, then those Docker processes, the way that you're going to do the Docker files start to look suspiciously like build packs anyway. So you might as well just use build packs.
I'd like to ask Mark about that. Mark mentioned building that stuff, a build pipeline with his tool set. Like, Mark, what are you using for that?
Well, so we're writing everything in Go, which makes everything a lot simpler. Andrew and I were kind of talking shit about this topic before we went on the air. I said that I was going to throw out this line that Docker owes a tremendous debt of gratitude to Bundler, because if it wasn't so damn hard to deploy Ruby apps, it wouldn't have been worth the effort to build something like Docker. I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, but it's also kind of true.
And don't forget Python.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all shit, right? This is what I like about Go. The single binary image makes life so much simpler for kind of everything. So our build pipeline is really simple. It's a makefile. But in more complex environments, I think Andrew's right. I think if we had a way to, so I like build packs. If we pull build packs all the way back to sort of the test stage, if build packs are part of our continuous integration pipeline, and we test the same artifact that we're going to deploy to prod, then I like build packs. If we're testing something that's different than what we're ultimately going to deploy to production, then I'm not so happy about the build pack.
Yeah, I mean, the way we did our Jenkins integration with CloudBees is they have the same thing that was going to run in the build pack is set to run in the Jenkins job. So it's all one clear, the same set of artifacts the whole way through.
Yeah, so I like build packs from that point of view. I like having some standards there, right? We talked about this a couple weeks ago on After Dark about how it's useful to set some standards and build some constraints around your process, and the build packs are a really interesting place to sort of set that kind of policy.
So, Mark, today you guys are building a Go binary for many of your stuff, and then you put that in an S3 blob store or something, and then you're going to say, hey, I'll just marry that with my production operating system image, which I expect is going to be like what we bring in Cloud Foundry is like a root file system. But you're saying that bringing that Go binary plus the file system together is like that's not a big deal.
Right, exactly. Because especially with Go, the amount of runtime that we need around that Go binary is really, really small.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like, what would a platform built just to run Go look like. Like it would be much more stripped down. And in some ways, the awesomeness of Lattice comes down to the fact that it's just Go. Like that makes it much easier to install, and the memory footprint overhead much smaller.
One
Yeah,
day
the
I'm gonna
out-of-box
realize.
experience for Lattice is awesome right now.
You said the out-of-box experience for Lattice is awesome right now?
Yep.
I'm not sure the one guy who tries to run a Java thing that has a different user, then we have some things that we could we need to work on some user management stuff to get parity with the experience on some other things.
So we have Ben Black trying to hop on. Can I just ask that anyone wants to lurk switch to the watch link so that Ben can come on and rant at the world a little bit? Because he's pretty fired up that he can't get in the box right now. Here you go, Ben. Hop in, Ben.
Here comes Ben.
From a nuclear submarine, I believe. Is usually how he's back.
I want to see the red light.
Oh, good.
Oh, come on.
Now he said, "Nah, I'm good." I'm like, "Yo, dude."
You can't do that, Ben.
You're being called out. So I will share, though, that James Barry, it was really interesting, though, this build packs versus container upload by developers. Just real-time feedback. We had 3 very large Fortune 100 customers ask us to verify this week that Docker upload could be turned off. They're like, this is a key feature for us. Bear, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually really not surprised to hear that, because we also had the exact same, I mean, not the exact same, it's very similar a push earlier. So in our commercial product, Pivotal Cloud Foundry, these large financial customers also asked us to turn off the ability to bring your own build pack. So we had that as a feature in the platform that, out of the box by default, developers can bring their own build pack if you want. But some of these more conservative places, they say, hey, we're going to have someone bless the standard ones that we want to be used, and for someone else to bring something else, they're going to have to go through some kind of hurdle or a gate, an approval process to get in. And I think it's very much the same way. It's if you go to, anybody can bring anything they want in the root file system. That's much even further down than bringing your own build pack. So I'm not surprised at all that they wanted this, because it allows them to, for example, when any of this stuff comes out, these security vulnerabilities that have been really popular the last couple of weeks, we've been getting hit with them on OpenSSL and things. You want to be able to.
Ghost was the turning point for them. They were trying to track down where that would be, who they needed to patch, and the mystery meat images, they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the complexity goes way up if you've got to track down every single person to host a workload on the platform and ask them to audit themselves, because that's someone's out of thousands of workloads, someone's going to get that wrong. And it makes it really difficult to certify, we're all Ghost patched up.
So you either need to enforce it with the platform, or by convention you have to have hygiene. So at the point where you have these things, you have a limited surface area so that you can operationally respond in reasonable manner.
Yeah, you keep mentioning the hygiene example, Andrew, and I think what you mean by that is some rigor and some process around how those things get rolled out from a developer laptop.
It means you would standardize on a small number of the base images, and then you'd have some kind of way to keep track of those, maybe even algorithmically, and then have something in place to migrate back and forth. I mean, one of the nice things about the build pack model is because you have those 3 layers of the root file system, the runtime from the build pack, and then the little bit of code you provide, that you can change any of those things independently pretty easily, and that's how we're able to respond on our own infrastructure to these things like Heartbleed and Ghost, and we can do that consistently, predictably across a huge infrastructure, much faster than anyone who's got even small variation in their images, especially if they don't keep good track of that.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be real, the variation is not going to be small, right? I love the mystery meat image phrase because it's completely true. It's horrifying, especially if those apps aren't being run by the developers who built those mystery meat containers.
If you do the Google images for mystery meat, somebody already made a slide for us internally. Let me see if I can share this. It's such a good image.
Well, all you did was you took the random machine under someone's desk that runs critical processes, and you just put them in Docker containers, and put them on your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, hell is being the ops guy that gets woken up at 3 a.m. to debug an app problem in a container that somebody built randomly.
Can everyone see my screen if I talk?
Yes. Yes.
See this? This is the image from mystery meat that somebody found to correct me out. It looks pretty unappetizing. But I thought it was really interesting that our outbound product management folks came back from a road trip and they're like, "Hey, are we sure that we can turn off, developer-enabled container upload? Can we turn that off?" And of course we will. But interesting market right now. That's all I can say.
Hi, I have another. One of other things that I saw there in the meetup was highway. I don't know how to pronounce that. They show the work they did with Diego making intercontainer communication in TCP/IP, and I just want to see how you guys see this. I think they're gonna present something in the CF Summit probably.
Just in time for Ben to join.
That's a great Ben question.
Yeah.
Are you turning it off? Is everyone gone now?
No, Ben. It's a very, very timely appearance by your part because this gentleman, Carlos, who is in China, was at a Cloud Foundry meetup. I think there was like 100 people there from what I saw on Twitter. And one of the things that was presented there at this 5-hour meetup on Saturday, and they had all these people show up, was TCP routing in Diego. And I know you've been spending some time with ANSI and talking about the various options for how to do non-HTTP protocols. So maybe you could just provide a brief, comment on that.
Well, it's late. It's late in the Hangout. That means that we can do secrets, right?
Absolutely.
Hold on, really, because I think what he was asking about was actually inner container communication that didn't go through the router, which is different than the.
No, yeah, but they expose via NAT. They have intercommunication. They have our own IP management. So each container receives your own IP and so on. They have the full. They implement the full thing.
So direct instance-to-instance communication is not something that I've been talking to folks about. I mean, it's a known need, but I haven't been going into detail on it. There may be other folks who have been doing that. We should ask them. But the specifics of non-HTTP protocols, there's really two approaches that we're working in parallel. One is the sort of direct blind approach, which is strictly layer 4. And for that, I think the most likely outcome, without committing anyone to anything, is direct communication between HA proxy and Diego, so that Diego can just do layer 4 routing via HA proxy, which is known good, which also means that you don't need another layer of stuff to do layer 4, which is really important to me.
So you have HA proxy on every node, every physical node?
This would be a more traditional inbound situation, meaning that it's intended to do layer 4 routing as a sort of standalone thing in the same way that we do it today. So not to say that that's the end goal, but in terms of sort of near-term stuff that would provide a really solid solution to the need to do layer 4, that's the approach that I would expect. There are tons of other interesting things to explore, but sort of minimum viable, that's the one. The other question that we are implicitly asked is for protocol aware, so layer 7 routing for non-HTTP protocols. There's actually a lot of value to that really has a different set of requirements from HTTP, especially when you're dealing with things like MySQL, where it's really, really important that you not break a connection in the middle of a transaction. So you want things to be aware of that. Now, I believe we just announced MySQL routing. Is that right?
Switchboard, I believe, went in.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Switchboard is there. And that's awesome, and so we start getting that. What we really want, though, is a more, I think, general framework for doing layer 7 routing that allows, for all protocols, HTTP or not, to have direct interaction with Diego so that we get to the point that Diego can essentially ask the router if it's okay to break a connection prior to it doing it, so that there can actually be a feedback loop between the routing and the scheduling. That's more speculative at this point, but that's really where we want to get. How exactly we achieve that, whether we do multiple standalone things as we would have today with GoRouter and Switchboard, or a sort of common platform that we run all of them in, TBD. Antti and I are discussing that quite a bit. Really the problem is that there are multiple good answers, and we actually have to look to sort of additional constraints as tiebreakers. So things outside of what we would normally consider part of the question that we're trying to answer. So to Andrew's point, might some of that involve protocol-aware routing on every single host? That could be a powerful concept. But there are a lot of open questions here. So that should be taken as an invitation for people to contribute ideas on that. If there are specific goals that people would have around layer 7 routing in particular, as opposed to just blind layer 4, which is much easier to do, but I think much less powerful when you're looking to have a really high availability, consistent performance system. You really need direct interaction between scheduling and the routing. So that's really the more pressing goal. It's just harder to do, so short-term layer 4, longer-term layer 7, and we'd love to hear feedback on how people would like to see that happen.
We should talk, Ben. I have a lot of ideas about layer 7 and PaaS.
I thought you might.
You guys know each other, right?
I know this PaaS hole.
Hey, Ben, what if the internet were already made out of things?
You know what? I've been theorizing that that may be the case.
Have you gotten your first call from a customer yet to talk about Internet of Things yet, Ben? Or are we still waiting? Is it still early days? No one interested?
I'm trapped under the mountain of inbounds. Please send help.
I feel really bad because, it was pretty cool to have Ben join the team, and we let the press interview him. And now the poor guy gets, my only job is, stand there with a stick, me and Arnie, telling salespeople, no, he cannot talk to your urgent customer CTO about the issue.
Well, but some of those are really powerful. So that, I'll tell you, and I'm not bashing anyone here, though it may sound like bashing, but the thing that is interesting to me is that there are lots of companies, big and small, trying to do IoT platform things. And this problem is so hard that despite the existence of all of those companies, and there are hundreds of them, right? We are still getting incredible traction with people who have IoT problems because nobody has figured out how to do this, right? So it's actually at the point that even dealing with us, who currently have nothing IoT specific, they'd rather do that than go with a sort of primitive IoT platform that doesn't really solve their total app problem, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these things tackle just the device problems, and they tackle it generally in a pretty small scale, demo-oriented way. So this is a tough nut to crack, and nobody has done it.
Yeah, but they'd almost rather go on the journey with us, given the bench that we have, the R&D strength that we have, and the people that we have, than to go with some sort of demoware.
Yeah, I think that the way that they're looking at it is that given that they're going to have to write a lot of the software themselves anyway, and for a lot of these folks that is a new and scary experience, they would rather work with us since through labs, we have the ability to really reliably teach them how to build and operate software. They recognize that that's the harder problem than, if they're not going to have a whole PaaS for IoT, the much harder problem is the app side of the PaaS and learning how to write software. So since we bring that to the table, seems pretty good. I think with a lot of other solutions, what they're looking at is it may get them a little bit further for the demo style stuff, but when it actually comes to building a full-scale production app, they're really not any further ahead than they would have been working with us. So I think that's how we got here. Now, obviously, we're going to build some awesome stuff this year, and so that's going to change the equation even further in our favor. But it's interesting to me, based on these conversations and based on the deals that are getting signed, that in 2015, having an IoT platform does not mean that you have an IoT platform.
So since we're an hour into this thing, it might be fun to talk about RFPs.
Oh man. Oh man.
Right at the end of the quarter.
Wow. Why don't we talk about eliminating Social Security?
I mean, part of the problem is that it seems like the buyers are their own worst enemy in some of this. My observation. Because
that has nothing to do with IoT, though, right? That's all these situations.
That's all enterprise software for decades.
Schaefer, let's do RFPs in hour 3 tonight. And that's when everyone's asleep and you're just sitting there talking to the screen.
I left the bourbon in the other room. I'll tell you, so this actually overlaps a lot with what I was just saying, in that they don't mean to be their own worst enemy. The problem is exactly that, in the same way that they don't really understand how to build and operate production services, they don't understand that they don't understand that. And so they're totally in earnest and with good reason saying, hey, I want you to do it this way, trying to come to us with a solution instead of with a problem. And it is a sign of serious maturity when they come to us and say, guys, we have a problem, and let's figure out how to solve it. So that's actually been, to me, the most interesting conversations to have, is the ones with the folks who really understand that they don't understand. And it's not that I understand how to solve all their problems, it's that we both recognize that we can do this together. So that is a message out to all the potential buyers of software from us or from anyone else, that it's most important to focus on the problem, no matter how sure you are of the solution.
Well, the way I summarize many things is you get the solution you deserve.
You may not get the solution you want, but you get the solution you deserve.
So Ben, are you doing a talk at Summit on IoT? Did that get put up?
I am going to be doing a talk on IoT in every hallway at all times. So
you didn't do a formal one?
No.
Ben did not submit a talk.
Oh, for shame.
Well, Schaefer told me that we had so many people from...
There will be plenty of pivotal talks, for sure.
So that's why I wasn't worried. And, I'll be there, and people will grow tired of me speaking of IoT, and I'll have to be buying them drinks to get an audience.
No sweat. I mean, it is a little bit of an embarrassment. We talk about Lattice, and I do think it's important for us to make the guys like Mark and Bracchio happy, who has his own special needs that I will not be happy until we meet them.
Mark, do you have special needs?
I mean, I do.
That didn't come out right. Now it's some sort of after-school movie. But that's important. But I do think what Ant Schaefer, there were 11 pivotal CF customers, Comcast, Lockheed Martin. It was an embarrassment of riches of all the people coming to speak. Garmin. Verizon about using PCF at the more enterprise.
Allstate, Kroger. It's like,
Yes, I would much rather our customers talk about our stuff than to have me get up and babble about IoT. They're going to have much more interesting stories.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be, I mean, that's, all the fun of Lattice is great, and I do think we need to always make sure we stay in touch with the cutting-edge grassroots communities and what they need. But we've got a full parade of really interested enterprise talking about how they're using this and how they're solving problems with it coming up May 11th and 12th. So, Mark, I don't know if I can buy you a ticket to come out, but it'd be great to have you there.
I was just looking at the site to see when it was. I've got a bunch of travel coming up. We should talk, though.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think it's crazy when you see some of these enterprises who haven't really been software shops for a while, figure out that they want to be that, have made some progress, and then all of a sudden they can go from days to do a deployment to minutes.
Well, it's an interesting market.
How many customers have we dealt with who have told us it takes 90 days or so to get a virtual machine? Right? And I think I need 2 hands to count those, which is kind of amazing.
I actually got put on a call because someone was saying, oh, they're using configuration management, and so maybe you could come talk to them. They're trying to do this thing, and I get on there, and they're the same thing. It wasn't 90 days. It took them a month to get a VM. And it's not that I don't want to help.
Between 30 and 90 days is for getting a VM.
Doesn't matter.
Nothing.
Yeah. You're just not ready to be cloud native, and sometimes you feel bad because it's not that they wouldn't do it. There's just this chain of, we'll call them Pareto inefficient Nash equilibriums in those organizations where they just can't go to that upstream thing and change it overnight so that they would have that. Even if it was OpenStack or vSphere or whatever, it's just organizational and social engineering. Prevents it from happening.
Everyone has totally nailed their local optimum.
We don't want you messing with these machines, so we're going to give you one when we get to the ticket that we have this huge backlog on, because we're viewed as a cost center, not a differentiating service. So then you can't have a VM for 90 days.
It's a good way to get yourself outsourced into the cloud.
Which is a whole different set of problems.
Oh yeah, n-squared problems.
Then you're at the mercy of Mark.
No, not anymore, man.
So the last time you were on here, you said you were in a new stealthy project. Can you talk about your thing a little bit more? Since we're at the end, we like to do secrets. If you could share with the...
Leak some secrets, Mark. Nobody's watching.
It's not that secret. I'll talk at a super high level, mostly because we don't really know what we're building yet. So we started a new company called Operable. We raised some money. We hired some people. We're going to build some tools to help people do incident response better is really the goal. We want to help everybody that does ops. And that doesn't just mean ops teams. That means kind of anybody who's doing ops. We want to help them do it better. We want to help them get notified better. We want to help them resolve problems collaboratively better. We want to help them get all the tools that they use to troubleshoot their infrastructure in one place, and we want to remember what they did so they can feed back what they learned into their development process.
That sounds awesome, Mark, but I have a question.
Come at me, Dan.
What if they're a no-ops shop?
Well, then they're out of business anyway, so it's cool.
They don't have incidents.
Well, then I'll just talk to their SRE team.
The other thing we realized last time was if you look at the the 10 greatest postmortems of all time, you're like 7 of them at 4 different places.
So there's 2 different ways to look at that.
I didn't want to say that.
Well, it's not that other people didn't have outages.
Everyone he marries dies. I don't know, but he's not guilty.
You sure you want me to come out to the Cloud Foundry Summit?
He mates and he kills.
I feel so bad for him. He's had such bad luck.
I don't think that the outages, their severity or their frequency is correlated with Mark. It's just the quality of the postmortem that we're referring to.
Totally in jest, beyond in jest. So.
But speaking of that, Mark, do you have any advice for GitHub on managing their DDoS attacks?
They're killing it. They're doing a great job, actually.
I know, but that's like come on, that's everyone's Monday morning quarterback is.
Yeah.
We did that in the first half hour there, Ben.
Well, you see all the great advice on Hacker News.
Oh yeah.
You know, Hacker News is actually, I've followed that thread because I was curious what people would say, because they certainly told me how to do DDoS mitigation better when I worked at GitHub. But they've refrained this time. To their credit, the GitHub guys have been killing it, though. I think they're going on something like 95 hours or something. They've been under continuous attack, and they're killing it.
Yeah, DDoS mitigation is hard, especially at really large scale. So, you know, when you start seeing 100 to 500 gigabits of DDoS traffic, life gets interesting. So I can totally feel for them, even having to deal with it for a short period of time, but for essentially a week, that's excruciating. So more power to them.
Hey, Mark, so you mentioned earlier you're deploying to clouds. Is this to assume that your service is more of a SaaS-based service than something you'd ship to somebody else?
Yeah, that's a good assumption. We're building a SaaS-based product, and we are so far building on AWS, but we're not married to AWS. We're definitely married to not building colos, though.
So does that make you a SaaS hole instead of a PaaS hole?
See, I'm an original SaaS hole, right? 37 Signals was my formative. That's what got me into the whole PaaS hole thing.
One could argue that 37 Signals remains the home of this asshole.
I knew that was coming as soon as that started.
Wow.
Set him up on a
zing.
Yeah. So, Mark, near and dear to our hearts, is there going to be an on-prem option?
We'll see.
All right. Maybe tightly integrated into CF.
Well, so we could talk.
I mean, frankly, if you're running on Lattice, it should be pretty easy to get that as an ISV off-the-shelf option on your Cloud Foundry.
I want continuous ops to go with my continuous deployment.
Makes sense.
So, Robin,
you heard it here first, folks, in case HP tries to patent it.
They already too late.
Primary purpose of Cloud Foundry After Dark is a document prior art to keep anyone from suing us for not having the idea first. Robin, any non-lurking you'd like to do?
Hi. I finally got in, and so I missed half of it. Also, I wasn't paying attention for the first half because I was eating dinner, as I always am at this hour on Sunday night. So, hello, I'm back from California and other places, and rejoining.
How's Elasticsearch over there?
No, wait,
we're called Elastic now, I'll have you know.
And Robin helped me. So Robin stopped by while she was in town for a lot of time, and was showing me the schedule of how long it's going to be before user namespaces comes to RHEL, and that they were barely in, or not officially in, Fedora yet. And that actually turned into a major issue since I talked to you that day, Robin. And most of our major big enterprise customers actually have now advised us that they would rather us stick with Ubuntu for the foreseeable future and not switch to Red Hat, given that they would not get user namespaces as a feature in Red Hat for that period of time. So that was actually a pretty awesome thing. You just stopping by to chat.
Doing my part to make sure the Red Hat stock goes up to from 70 to 75 over the past several days.
It's not in any way pro or anti Red Hat. It's just more like it's market education, right? Like I
was just glad to be able to. I always joke that wiki stands for where information kills itself, because no one can ever find anything on a wiki anywhere at all. So I was happy to be human resources telling me where something was on a wiki.
Have you seen the wiki link for exactly when all the security features are landing? I was like, no, I have not.
Yes, well, if only the wiki used Elasticsearch on the back end, then maybe you would have found it. But, oh well. What do you do?
So James Baer, do you want to tell a little bit about the fallout of that decision? Because we had talked about this a couple weeks ago on After Dark, and we kind of made a strategic call to stick with Ubuntu until RHEL has proper container support.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, we weren't sure what the feedback would be, and when we went to customers and talked to them about it, they want user namespaces. that's the a key feature, and I think it's on the RHEL roadmap, so they're going to get there, and then we'll revisit the operating system support then. Another thing that's happening in the same space is that or not same exact space, but just kind of like in the realm of what's coming in Linux. There's another thing going on that we're looking at getting a Garden Linux support for the overlay, quote unquote, file system, not overlay FS, but overlay, which is now in the upstream Linux kernel. And so it's really exciting just to see some of these things, like whether it's user namespaces for something like security, or overlay support so that you can have a consistent copy on write file system in your container backend of choice. That we really are going to be in some way, like maybe 6 to 12 months, maybe it's 18 months, but at some point everyone is going to have a base platform that's going to have all these features that you can just assume are there. That's really cool that the kind of the distro dependency, you're still going to have maybe different, some different init systems or different other variants of packaging systems and things, but it's cool to see that stuff kind of coming together.
Well, good news, you're not going to have that different init system thing. It's going to be system D everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
Yeah.
I guess I have a drink. You can bring up system D. If you have to. Getting over it.
I'm done. Don't want to talk about it anymore.
So how long, and anyone should jump in with their guess, until the world recognizes, the tech world, Insular and echo chambers as it is, realizes that the container launcher world has been commodity from day one, and this has all just been a lot of hype for nothing?
It'll take a few days.
Days?
You told us. I mean, the secret's out now.
Well, I mean, I'm just repeating what I hear.
Ben, I think it's going to be a while. I agree with you. I agree with the premise, and I talk shit about it all the time about how there's not much technology, and that technology for all these container launchers, they're all using kernel features. But the reality is those kernel features are not very accessible or user-friendly. And when you put a better UI in front of it and a better developer experience and a better UX, you can win for a while.
Yeah, it turns out it doesn't take much, right? That's the lesson of this. I heard something really funny the other day, which was, and I won't say where I heard it from, that people were actually comparing Docker to VMware in the early days. And that we're going to file that under not even wrong, which is a concept people should look up if they don't understand it. But to in any way compare Mendel and Diane Green and the rest of the early folks at VMware, who are just some of the smartest people ever to walk the earth, and the combination of them and what they achieved at VMware was astonishing, to wrapping some scripts around C groups. I mean,
Well, that was LXC.
Wrapping around LXC, which is wrapped around C groups. But I know the hole is deep. So, I would ask that if people are a little confused on this subject of the quality of the technology involved, and
but at the same time, Ben, we live in a world where Facebook has a certain stock price. What's
totally losing you there, but
Is DDoS Clay.
yeah,
I don't want this to come out.
$billion, and
we lost all that, bud.
the fact that you can.
Yeah, he's being censored right now. That's a good pose, though. It's a good freeze.
Waters push the censor button.
Yeah.
No, I think I have a network problem.
Yeah, I think you have a network problem.
Your kids are
I
bit torn crazy.
I would actually argue that that Facebook has actually shown itself to be more than capable of hiring incredible people and producing incredible technology.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you can do that when you get a bunch of money, which you're going to see these other people have.
You can, but I want to point out a couple things. One is that the VMware team was ridiculously smart before they got any money, and the Facebook team was pretty smart before they got that much money. So I'm just not seeing the kind of technical leadership that is showing up at these other places.
Ben, you can be more direct. I mean, I think, not to quote you, like you're like, look, Ryan Dahl took a lot of credit for some basic overlay on top of what Google had made at V8, and you feel the same way about some of the stuff that's happening right now, right?
I do. It's useful packaging, but you know, it's packaging, and people need to understand that, especially the people making it. Right? That's actually the biggest disconnect, is that people wrapping scripts around LXC think that they are producing some deep technology that's going to alter the universe. This is false. Sorry.
The thing that we should keep in mind, and that we should learn observing this, is the value of user experience in 2015.
Not just 2015. I think the better parallel, instead of Docker and VMware, and this is going to sound uncharitable to Docker, and I don't mean it that way, but Docker and Mongo.
No, Docker and Mongo is exactly the right.
It's the holy trinity: Docker, Mongo, and Node.js. May they rest in peace. Like,
well, so Mongo's a great example, right? As much as we love to hate Mongo, they got traction because they built a very good developer experience and made it easy to use and consume for developers. And we can hate on the back end and how smart they are technically as much as we like, but it doesn't change the fact that they were successful kind of across those angles.
And you know what? I want all that is true, but I want to point out that my problem is actually when it sort of reverses direction, right? Where you can come into it and you can say, look, you're right. You know, there's not a lot of deep tech here, but it turned out that the deep tech was really hard for people to use, and by making it easy to use, by making it accessible, we actually made it successful, right? So that's a really critical part of this whole process. That's absolutely true. And if that was the message being delivered, I'd be all about it. But that's not what's being said here, right? What's being said here is this is awesome technology, and the technical leadership from Docker is, you know, visionary, blah, 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 blah. And I'm sorry, that's just not true.
Yeah,
it's obvious on the face of it.
I think everything that's not, you know, lasting in terms of tech has a little bit of a hype cycle, right? It's, will that fix your problem? So,
and I think that there's more than one axis to measure awesome on, and I'm sure you can find a lot of people right now who would stand up and say that it is awesome.
I think what's interesting to me, though, is really focusing on your use cases. And I think what really made me happy about Mark's tweets about Lattice was that he's like, look, you did not take on the complexity of networking that other people have. You made it easier for them to get an app up quickly. And for someone who's trying to do app-centric things, you build a useful tool.
Yeah, and when I see something like Mark saying, wow, I got this up and running really quickly and it was super easy, I go, huh, interesting, because super easy things to get up and running turn out to be the things that people gravitate towards.
That's right.
Like, so we have this Spring Cloud project now, and I think the next set of blogs that I would like to see come out is like, hey, how do you run your Spring Cloud stack on Lattice and build apps really fast? Not how do you go solve, you know, some highly complex matrix of container-based infrastructure problems.
Surprise! We already have that. We just.
Hey, it's secret time. We're way deep. This is deep track now, so all secrets can come out.
This is the deepest after dark we've ever gone.
Well, it's getting late, so.
Hour 3 is
Hi, Ben.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for RFPs. I got another 90 minutes.
Hold on. What do you got?
Your thoughts on Facebook jumping on IoT last week, releasing a PaaS platform, a platform for IoT. What's your thoughts on this?
I think that they are uniquely positioned to build an incredible consumer platform. They've been doing, APIs and developer engagement for stuff like this for a decade, right? And they know how to do it. They know how to do it at scale. They know how to get their developers excited. If you go back and look at the various talks from F8, it's amazing, right? So I think that they're going to do an incredible job there. I think it will be primarily focused around consumer, and that's fine. That's really what they do. A lot of what I've been looking at has nothing consumery about it. And looking at industrial use cases, it's not that it's sort of a dressed up consumer use case. It looks nothing like a consumer use case. So I think part of the problem is painting everything with a really broad IoT brush. But on the consumer front, I wouldn't be surprised if Facebook just destroys everyone on that front. Google spent a lot of money on Nest and obviously is looking to push heavily, for obvious reasons, I think, into consumer IoT stuff. But my money's on Facebook in that battle.
Yeah, those are the guys from Parse who I knew before they went over there. I've been talking to them a bunch about partnering with them. So they I think were the seed germ of some of this stuff was on the Parse platform, which runs on MongoDB, by the way, or did when they went there.
That's all right. Messenger was based on MQTT. So.
Yeah. So any final secrets? I thought the one interesting thing on the Cloud Foundry Summit agenda was that Microsoft is on the agenda with a demo of Cloud Foundry Bosch running on, and full Cloud Foundry running on Microsoft Azure. James Baer, you've been talking to the Microsoft team. I think they're getting close to giving us an internal demo, right?
Yeah, we've had some ongoing discussions about that, and if you're following the Cloud Foundry mailing list, over the last probably 6 months or so, you've seen people kicking that around, and some people even doing it on their own. And seeing that come together in a more put together from a enterprise investment instead of one guy's GitHub repo kind of way is going to be pretty exciting. A lot of customers asking about it.
That should be fun. And hey, wouldn't it be possible to extend Lattice with the new Windows agent support as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that'd be pretty cool, right? So what we're talking about there is you could have Lattice cells on Linux, and you could have Lattice cells on Windows, and you could have Windows containerized apps. It's not the same level.
Don't you need the placement pool logic in Diego to do that, right?
No, because what the placement pool is it actually delegates down to a Diego primitive that is basically a scheduling constraint. And so if we expose that in Lattice through it's going to be exposed through the receptor API. The receptor is the API head for Diego. If you just know how to talk to that the right way, you'd be able to run a containerized Windows workload if you had Windows cells there.
So does that work right now?
We haven't put that all the way together yet, but yeah, it should, because the team that's working on the Windows stuff is all doing that on Diego. So the Lattice is Diego plus a little bit more. So it's already working on Diego standalone. So yeah, I mean, in a sense, you could say it has been, except we just haven't put it easy to consume with Lattice just quite yet. But it's definitely easy to, it's achievable for us to get there soon. The thing I want to point out about the Windows containerization is this is really more about efficiency, and in terms of getting container density and getting the speed of a container instead of waiting for a full VM to boot. It's not so much about container isolation, because the Windows primitives are not as good as what the Linux kernel has for namespacing and C groups. It's like, for example, the registry in Windows is something that is not multi-tenant friendly. There's just things like that are coming up. So we're going to advise people to take that into consideration. Don't consider it for multi-tenant stuff, but it's sure going to be an awesome experience to say, hey, run this Windows thing and just have it start working right away.
So we're about 90 minutes in. This is the who's up for the 3-hour RFP discussion?
No.
I'm just kidding. So unless we have any more secrets or any ahas anyone wants to shout out, I think we're kind of at the end. Because we do have work tomorrow, right?
Oh. Yeah.
I know, terrible.
Damn it.
You just got to your
Got
job.
my
Ryan.
cussing in for the night.
You can still be in the honeymoon phase.
Oh,
The salad days.
mostly it's that the kids have been on spring break all week, and tomorrow's the first day back, so it's going to be like literally rude awakening tomorrow morning.
Actually, I have the opposite. Tomorrow's the first day of spring break over here, so
Yes.
hopefully it'll be above 32 degrees.
I'll send you some of mine. It was like 95 here today.
So there you go. Going once, going twice, without, unless someone wants to shout, I'd bid adieu. Till next time.
Good night.